December 21st, 1939. Temperature, -40 degrees Celsius. The sun barely rises above the horizon in eastern Finland during winter. For only a few hours each day, the sky turns a dull gray before darkness returns again. The forests along the Kola River are silent. Snow blankets everything. Thick, untouched layers stretch between endless lines of pine and birch trees. Into that silence moves a Soviet patrol, 12 soldiers. They walk in single file through the deep snow, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their uniforms are dark khaki, the standard issue of the Red Army. Against the white landscape, they stand out like shadows on ice. None of them wear camouflage. Most of them don't even have proper winter clothing. When Stalin ordered the invasion of Finland 3 weeks earlier, Soviet commanders had promised the war would be over quickly. 2 weeks, they said. Finland would collapse under the weight of the Red Army. It had already been 3 weeks, and nothing was going according to plan. The patrol leader, a sergeant from Leningrad, moves cautiously through the forest. The snow reaches almost to his knees with every step. He scans the tree line ahead. Nothing moves. The forest seems empty. Only the sound of boots crunching against frozen snow breaks the silence. Somewhere far away, artillery echoes like distant thunder. Then the man walking behind him collapses. At first, the sergeant thinks the soldier has slipped, but when he turns, he sees the body lying motionless in the snow. A dark stain spreads beneath the man's head. There had been no gunshot, no warning. The patrol instantly scatters. Men dive behind trees, snowbanks, anything that might offer protection. The sergeant shouts orders, demanding that his men locate the shooter, but the forest reveals nothing. No movement. No smoke, no sound, only the endless white silence. Another soldier falls, then another. Each death is sudden and silent. The survivors fire wildly into the trees, but their bullets strike nothing except snow and bark. Whoever is shooting at them cannot be seen. Within minutes, the patrol breaks. The remaining soldiers retreat through the snow, dragging wounded men behind them. 5 of the 12 are dead. They never saw the man who killed them. They never heard the rifle that fired the shots. That night, back at their frozen camp, the sergeant files his report. In the description of the attack, he writes 2 words. Words that will soon spread across the Red Army like a disease. White Death. Somewhere in the forest, hidden beneath a layer of snow and branches, a Finnish sniper calmly reloads his rifle. His weapon is not unusual. It is a bolt-action rifle. No telescopic sight, no special modifications. Just iron sights and a steady hand. The man holding it is small, only 5 feet 3 inches tall. His name is Simo Häyhä, and the war has barely begun. The Winter War had begun 3 weeks earlier. On November 30th, 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland with overwhelming force. Joseph Stalin wanted territory. Specifically, he wanted a buffer zone around the city of Leningrad. Soviet leadership believed Finland could easily be pushed back from the border and forced to surrender land. Negotiations had failed, so Stalin chose war. The Red Army crossed the Finnish border with 450,000 troops. Tank divisions rolled forward across frozen roads. Artillery batteries stretched for miles. Aircraft roared overhead in massive formations. On paper, the outcome seemed obvious. The Soviet Union had a population of 168 million people. Finland had only 3.7 million. The Red Army deployed more than 6,000 tanks. Finland had barely 30, most of them outdated. The Soviet Air Force sent nearly 4,000 aircraft into the campaign. Finland could field just over 100. By every measurable statistic, the war should have ended in weeks. Stalin's generals promised him Finland would collapse before his birthday on December 21st. Instead, the invasion quickly turned into something far worse than the Soviet command expected. The problem wasn't equipment, it was the environment. Finland in winter is one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees Celsius. Snow buried roads and forests under meters of ice and powder. The daylight hours shrank to just a few dim, gray hours before darkness returned again. Soviet soldiers were completely unprepared. Most had been issued ordinary uniforms. Their boots froze, their rifles jammed. Their dark clothing made them stand out against the white landscape like targets. The Finnish soldiers defending their homeland had no such problems. They were used to the cold. Many of them had spent their entire lives in these forests. They wore white camouflage suits that blended perfectly with the snow. They moved on skis instead of marching through deep drifts. They could travel dozens of kilometers through terrain that slowed Soviet columns to a crawl. Most importantly, they knew how to fight here. The Finnish strategy avoided direct confrontation whenever possible. Instead of meeting Soviet divisions head-on, small Finnish units slipped through the forests, attacking supply lines, isolating enemy units, and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Entire Soviet columns were surrounded in the wilderness and destroyed piece by piece. The Finns called this tactic Motti warfare, named for the way Finnish loggers cut large stacks of firewood into smaller piles. The same concept applied to Soviet armies. Break them apart, isolate them, destroy them one section at a time. And among the soldiers defending the Kola River sector was a quiet farmer named Simo Häyhä. He had been born on December 17, 1905, in a small rural village called Rautjärvi. His family owned a farm surrounded by dense forest. From childhood, Häyhä spent most of his time outdoors. He hunted birds, rabbits, and elk. In Finland, hunting was not sport, it was survival. Families depended on it for food during the long winters. Young Simo learned quickly, but unlike most hunters, he treated shooting almost like a science. He practiced constantly. He studied the wind. He learned how sound traveled through trees. He learned how animals reacted to movement. Most importantly, he learned patience. Hours could pass while waiting for the perfect shot, sometimes entire days. By the age of 17, he joined the Finnish Civil Guard, a voluntary defense organization that trained civilians in marksmanship and military skills. His instructors immediately noticed his talent. In one training exercise, Häyhä fired 16 accurate shots at targets 150 meters away in under 1 minute, all while using a bolt-action rifle, in freezing winter conditions. When the Soviet invasion began in November 1939, Häyhä was 34 years old. He reported to duty with the 6th Company of Infantry Regiment 34, stationed along the Kola River. The Kola sector would become one of the most brutal battlegrounds of the entire war. Soviet divisions attacked repeatedly, wave after wave of infantry supported by tanks and artillery. The Finnish defenders were vastly outnumbered. At the beginning of the battle, the Soviets held a 4-to-1 advantage in manpower. Later, that advantage would grow to 10-to-1, but the Finnish line held. The soldiers defending the river began repeating a phrase that soon became famous throughout the country: Kola kestää, Kola holds. It became a promise. No matter how many Soviet soldiers came, no matter how many artillery shells fell, Kola would not break. and hidden somewhere in those frozen forests was a sniper who would soon become a legend. But before Simo Häyhä proved what he could do, Finnish snipers were dying. One of the best marksmen in the regiment was Corporal Urho Vani. He carried a Swedish rifle equipped with a German telescopic sight, the most advanced equipment available at the time. On December 8, 1939, Vani positioned himself on a ridge overlooking a Soviet supply route. Within the first hour, he shot 3 enemy soldiers. He never got a fourth. A Soviet counter-sniper spotted him. The sunlight reflected briefly off the glass lens of his scope, just for a second. That was enough. One shot. Vani died instantly. 3 days later, another Finnish sniper made the same mistake. Again, the sunlight caught the scope lens. Again, a Soviet sniper fired. Again, a Finnish soldier died. The Finns began calling it the death flash. Telescopic sights were supposed to give snipers an advantage. Instead, they were getting them killed. Simo Häyhä listened carefully to the reports. He watched good shooters die because of their equipment. Then he made a decision that most snipers would consider ridiculous. He would not use a scope. Instead, he chose the simplest possible weapon, a standard M2830 Mosin-Nagant rifle. Iron sights only, no optics, no magnification, just skill. His reasoning was brutally practical. A scope forced the sniper to raise his head higher to look through the lens. Even a few extra centimeters could expose a shooter to enemy fire. Iron sights allowed Häyhä to keep his profile extremely low. The second problem was temperature. In -40-degree weather, telescopic lenses fogged constantly. The heat from a human eye created condensation on the frozen glass. That moisture could blur the target completely. Iron sights had no glass. Nothing could fog. And finally, scopes reflected light. Even a tiny flash could reveal a sniper's position to an enemy hundreds of meters away. Iron sights reflected nothing. They were dull metal, invisible in the snow. While Soviet snipers relied on expensive optics, Simo Häyhä trusted his own eyes. He had spent 17 years hunting in these forests. He knew how to judge distance instinctively. Wind direction, elevation, the natural rhythm of breathing before pulling the trigger. Technology would only slow him down. The Soviet snipers he faced had superior equipment, but equipment does not win battles. Skill does, and Simo Häyhä was about to prove it. Every morning before dawn, Simo Häyhä prepared for the same ritual. The forests along the Kola River were silent in the darkness. Snow creaked beneath the weight of frozen trees, and the temperature often dropped far below -30 degrees. For most soldiers, simply surviving in that environment was a challenge. For Häyhä, it was home. He dressed slowly and methodically. First came the white camouflage suit, a loose snow smock that covered his uniform completely. Only his eyes remained visible. Against the endless white landscape, the outfit made him nearly invisible. Next, he packed the few supplies he would carry for the day. A small piece of hard bread, frozen sausage, a few sugar cubes for quick energy, a canteen kept inside his coat so the water would not freeze solid, extra ammunition, though he rarely needed much, and finally, his rifle, the Finnish M2830 Mosin-Nagant. Bolt action, iron sights, reliable even in brutal winter conditions. Häyhä carried no tent, no sleeping bag, no heavy equipment. Everything he needed existed in the forest itself. Once ready, he strapped on his skis and glided silently through the snow. Finnish soldiers moved through the wilderness differently than the Soviet troops. Instead of marching in columns, they traveled lightly and quietly, using narrow trails that wound through the forest. Häyhä often skied 20 or 30 kilometers before reaching the area he had chosen for the day. He never selected a position randomly. Days earlier, Sometimes weeks earlier, he had scouted each location carefully. A small rise overlooking open ground, a fallen tree offering natural cover, a snowbank that concealed his silhouette. Once he arrived, the preparation began. First, he built a small wall of packed snow in front of him. This served two purposes. It stabilized his rifle and absorbed the recoil when he fired, preventing loose snow from spraying into the air. That spray of snow could reveal a sniper's position. Second, he pressed snow tightly into his mouth. The reason was simple but critical. In extreme cold, every breath produced a visible cloud of vapor. A sniper exhaling normally would create a white mist that could be seen from hundreds of meters away. By holding snow inside his mouth, Häyhä cooled his breath before it left his body. The vapor disappeared. The cold burned his gums and teeth. He ignored the pain. Finally, he poured water over the packed snow wall and allowed it to freeze. Within minutes, the ice hardened into a solid rest for his rifle. Then he lay down behind it and waited, sometimes for hours, sometimes the entire day. His body remained completely motionless. Ice formed on his eyelashes. His fingers went numb. The temperature was cold enough to kill an unprepared person within minutes, but Häyhä never moved. He had spent his entire life learning how to wait. Eventually, a target would appear. A Soviet soldier crossing an open clearing, an officer standing to give orders, a machine gun crew setting up their position. When that moment came, Häyhä raised his rifle. He aligned the iron sights and fired. One bullet, one kill. He never fired rapidly. Speed was unnecessary. Accuracy mattered far more. After taking the shot, he remained still for a moment. Then he quietly relocated. The Soviet soldiers searching for him in the forest would find nothing but empty snow. Within weeks, the Red Army realized something strange was happening in the Kola sector. Patrols disappeared. Officers were shot while giving commands. Machine gun crews were killed before they could even fire. Entire squads reported being attacked by a sniper they never saw. At first, Soviet commanders dismissed the reports, but the complaints kept coming. Soldiers spoke about an invisible killer hiding in the forests, someone who fired without warning and vanished before anyone could respond. The rumors spread through the Red Army quickly. Soon, soldiers began whispering a new name, Belly Smert, the White Death. Fear spread faster than bullets. Some Soviet soldiers refused to move through the forests at all. Others froze in place when entering open ground. Political officers, commissars assigned to enforce discipline, began threatening soldiers with execution if they refused orders. In some cases, it didn't matter. Men shot themselves in the hand or foot to escape the front lines. Better a wound than facing the White Death again. One Soviet soldier wrote in his diary, "We are not fighting men, we're fighting a ghost." He was found dead the next morning, a single bullet through the throat. The Red Army tried to eliminate the sniper responsible. First, they sent counter-snipers, experienced marksmen equipped with telescopic rifles. Their only mission was to hunt Häyhä. It didn't work. He spotted them before they spotted him. One Soviet sniper had already killed several Finnish soldiers while searching for Häyhä. Late one afternoon, he decided to abandon his position. As he rose from the snow, sunlight briefly reflected from the lens of his scope. Just a tiny flash. Häyhä had been watching. The shot came from 450 meters away. The Soviet sniper fell instantly. Next, the Red Army tried artillery. Whenever commanders suspected Häyhä might be operating in a certain area, they ordered massive bombardments. Hundreds of shells crashed into the forest. Trees shattered. Snow exploded into the air. The ground churned into craters. But Häyhä was rarely there. He moved constantly. By the time the shells landed, he had already disappeared deeper into the forest. Finally, Soviet commanders tried overwhelming force. Large infantry assaults.
dozens of soldiers advancing together, hoping numbers would protect them. Häyhä simply shot them one at a time. His deadliest day came on December 21st, 1939, the same day Stalin had expected to celebrate victory in Finland. Instead, Häyhä killed 25 Soviet soldiers in a single day. As winter continued, his reputation grew on both sides of the front. Finnish newspapers began calling him taika-ampuja, the magic shooter. For Finnish soldiers, he became a symbol, proof that a small country could resist a massive army. But fame meant nothing to Simo Häyhä. Every morning, he returned to the forest. Every day, the war continued, and every day, somewhere in the frozen woods of Finland, another Soviet soldier died without ever seeing the man who fired the shot.